start tonight with a brief history, explain why the so-called legal opinions are so misleading, and then set out the rationale behind our option 7. We plan to keep our presentation to less than 30 minutes because after this we want to hear from you and to provide further detail and backup for what we are saying through our answers. When asking your questions, please feel free to direct them to any one of us. We've worked on this together and we all have a good grasp of the facts. You'll see slides tonight. Copies of these slides that we are using will be put up on our website in the next few days. So for those of you who are thinking of making notes of them, you can get them later directly off the website should you wish. And so now for a little history. Amalgamation, as you all know, took place at the end of the year 2000. It was not so much of an amalgamation, however, as a merger for administration purposes of two distinctly different communities. For instance, Ward 2 councillors have double votes on certain matters. That's different. That's unusual. Financial reserves were required to be kept separated. Why? Because the township had lots. Ward 2 continued to use the policing force of their choice, the OPP, not Port Hope Police. And this is not a commentary on which is the better force or the more appropriate force, but it's a commentary that these two distinct communities see things differently. The new council of the merged communities adopted a policy that there be no shift of tax burden between the wards. Ward 1 being Old Port Hope and Ward 2 being Old Township of Hope. By the way, this policy appears in writing in virtually every tax rating bylaw since amalgamation. And I might add, except 2013. If one combined the tax levies of the two communities, going back as far as we could research, to 1992, the two communities were consistently taxing of a whole number, the combined number, 85% of that number was raised in Port Hope and 15% in Hope Township. So when amalgamation took place, the council of the day simply used those baselines so as to continue the practice and not show any shift of tax burden. As alluded to previously, in 2003, Council adopted the policy of area rating that formalized this experience and set out an adjustment formula and their policy of no shift of tax burden. 3 years later, when it became clear that the adjusting formula wasn't working as intended, the formula was amended to prevent the Ward 2 share falling below 14.2% of the whole. And by the way, I'm going to try to stay away from specific numbers. There's lots of them, and you can have lots of them later. They're there. In early 2012, the notion arose that Ward 2 taxes should be made the same as Ward 1 taxes. This resulted in the formation of what is known as the Area Rating Working Group, a committee composed of 3 councillors without a vote and 5 citizen members with a vote to review the amalgamation formula and recommend amendments and improvements that would produce a fair and equitable system of area rating for future years. 3 of the 5 citizen members of that committee are before you tonight. The work of the committee was ponderous and problematic. Truth is, we had great difficulty obtaining reliable financial information. For instance, staff could not tell us what any department spent to provide services in the respective wards. They also provided us with multiple versions of the same financial data. Particular examples include 4 versions of how the LLRW trust interest was used, the last version of which shows over a $1 million variance with the statement obtained from the trust fund managers. Payments in lieu data, these are the monies paid by government in lieu of realty tax, was initially told to us to be about $750,000 a year, and then progressively whittled down to being what they referred to as trivial. Wildly inaccurate figures for average household assessment were given to us. Staff claimed for over 8 months that the average Ward 2 house was assessed at less than the average Ward 1 house before having to admit, because of the ferreting of Rick Norman, that the average, in fact, for Ward 2 is 46% higher than in Ward 1. Think about how this skews and models and plan. Because of the inadequacy of, or complete lack of financial data, the committee was forced to lump many of the cost centers into common. And that's why you will hear references, oh, so much was agreed to as being common. To quote from a report to our June 24, 2013 meeting, quote, in our past committee meetings, all discussion of what costs are common took place with the members understanding that a later agenda topic would cover the issue of dividing the common costs by ward. The other problem we encountered was the sudden appearance of what I will call bought-in legal opinions. The first of these appeared in January 2013 and claimed, contrary to all the documentation on the subject, that the Ward 2 LLRW Trust Fund was not a trust at all and could be spent. By the way, if it were spent, it would be contrary to the terms of the amalgamation order in Ward 1. We're not finished with this subject, but I don't want to dwell on it here. We'll give you more detail later. As we were working without financial data from staff, we had to reach out and find other ways of determining what sort of area rating would fairly represent what the actual costs or tax burden should be. We achieved this through several different approaches. First, we looked for service levels that had improved in Ward 2. There's a pause here. However, the thing is that if service levels had improved, then it's logical to assume that Ward 2's share of the taxes should increase. That's fair. But we couldn't find any. In fact, the only evidence we could dig up showed that perhaps some of the service levels were actually decreasing. Do you remember when the snow plows came out? When the snow started to fall? So that service levels and change of service levels was not going to be a reason to justify paying more, and it was demonstrating that Ward 2 was in fact probably paying its fair share. Certainly, we could not dig up anything to say that Ward 2 wasn't paying its fair share. So we looked at other municipalities and found that, for instance, rural Northumberland tax levels in other municipalities averaged 62% of what urban tax levels are. Using that as a measure, the appropriate share of Ward 2 turns out to be 17%, a little more than 15, but not much. We took into account the higher household assessments in Ward 2, which when adjusted to match Ward 1, you do a matching factor here, again, showed that the split should be 17% Ward 2, 83% Ward 1. If we equalize the overall average tax bill, bearing in mind that Ward 2 households pay much higher education and county tax by virtue of their average assessment being 46% higher, what does that produce? The split, if that indicator were followed, would be 84.5% Ward 1, 15.5% Ward 2. Policing costs. Now they have been tracked separately every year. Why? Because the OPP sends a bill. Easy. They have been surprisingly consistent, virtually unchanged in ratio. 84.5% Ward 1, 15.5% Ward 2. Every indicator we could find pointed to the same thing. The allocation of taxes between Ward 1 and Ward 2 was pretty much on the mark. So, with this in mind, when Council asked what we would recommend on how to set taxes for 2013, there was a vote at the committee, 3-2, 3-4, and 2 against, on splitting the common costs 82.5% Ward 1 and 17.5% Ward 2. Now that's a little higher than we had found all these indicators were pointing to, but we believe that it was within the realm of being fair and equitable, and if anything, would result slightly more benefit to Ward 1 and Ward 2, but it was close enough. And we are, after all supposed to be getting along together. that's one of the problems, by the way, of this whole subject. Because the way this is turning into a very divisive exercise in splitting people, one side in the country and the other side in town. Now, we have a lot of very, very close friends and people whom we admire, and all of those things in Ward 1. And I don't like that sort of activity. In mid-June this year, out of the blue, came the second legal opinion. It claimed the rules set out by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs effectively eliminates the possibility of area rating any common costs. Although this is exactly what the municipality has been doing for over a decade without any complaints or questions from that ministry. The legal opinion went on to claim that all the common costs must henceforth be single rated. Everybody pays by their weighted assessment. And further, that ministry rules would not permit the phasing in of any resulting tax increases. This was devastating. If true, it meant all of our work had been for nothing. Fortunately, this latest legal opinion was as ill-conceived as it was poorly researched. When we contacted the ministry, they directed us to the city of Hamilton, where, guess what? They use area rating based on what services are received by different parts of their expanded municipality. And, guess what? They use phasing to soften any resulting tax increases. And they use what I'll call a super phasing. They use variable phasing. So that if the phasing you're getting phased with raises your taxes more than a certain percent, they phase it down a bit. Stretch it out. A little different. Legal opinion. Local. To quote from a staff report from the city of Hamilton, legislatively, all services except for public health can be area rated. So we have developed an area rating formula using the City of Hamilton approach. Port Hope staff cannot hide behind the inadequacy of their accounting system. They will have to learn to allocate service costs just like any other business or municipality, i.e. Hamilton, in this day and age. Our formula is fair, equitable, and fully compliant with the legislation. It reflects the costs of services received. It respects significant differences in service levels. It acknowledges that all major services should be considered. And now I'm going to call on Bill Bickle to explain in detail this option 7.
I'd like to add my thanks to all of you for coming out to get a better sense of what's going on. Taxation is a complex issue, we all know that, and it's fallen to me to explain some of the detail of that. I'm not actually going to explain option 7, that's going to come at the end, that's our big surprise. But I am going to give you a little bit of history of how the group worked and what some of the stuff that we did and some of the things we learned. And some of this will be a little bit of an expansion on what Ian has talked about, but it's more, a little more detail and a little more explanation. The area rating group, working group, was appointed by council in 2012. We had 4 jobs to do: to review the background and current distribution of tax burden between the 2 wards. We were to identify and review options for a revised approach, and you can see we've ticked those because we did those. We were also supposed to assist in making a recommendation to council to proceed, and we did assist in making some recommendations, but our recommendations weren't taken, and we did not assist with making the recommendations, and I say recommendations that you would have heard last Monday. Really, we think that's one option. It's not 6 options. And we have not been supporting the development of the communications to the public. You didn't see us standing up there on Monday night last week. So I want to make it clear that we're not here on behalf of the council, and we're not here on behalf of the entire working group. We're just 3 people from Ward 2 who happen to be on the working group. The members, I'm just going to say the next slide for the people in the other room so that they can advance them. Just slide 4. The working group members were the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the chair of finance committee. The Ward 1 reps were John Quantrill and Gord Walter, and as you know, Ian and Rick and I were the members from Ward 2. As I say, we are speaking on our own. On the next slide, you can see some, we said we didn't want to give you too much data, but we do want you to see that there is data supporting what we're talking about. This slide has quite a few numbers, but what you can see is of the total taxes that were taken in since 1994 to 2000, Ward 2, then known as Hope Township, was always paying somewhere in the range of sort of 14%. So that's where the 1486 or 1585 split came from. It wasn't random, it wasn't arbitrary, it was based on historical data. And so we'd like to just say that the 1585 split of taxes was grounded in fact. At the next slide, you can see that pre-amalgamation, in the 6 years prior to amalgamation, costs went up about 3.3% a year. Now that's in both wards. They probably didn't go up that much in Hope Township because things were well managed. But even then, they were only going up 3.3% a year. And since amalgamation, they've gone up 6.4% per year. And we would argue that this is not a revenue issue. As someone said at the meeting on Monday night last week at the rec center, this isn't a revenue issue, it's an expense issue. And it's an expense control issue. We would argue that spending's out of control, but we're not here to try to figure out how to fix that. We're just here to try to figure out how to fix the tax rate. The next slide is about the low-level radioactive waste, or LLRW. That comes up in conversations a lot. In some respects, it's an issue that is deeply ingrained in the taxation issue, and in some respects, it's a side issue. And so, for the purposes of our option, we're leaving it out. The $10 million was given to Ward. Hope Township received a $10 million a fund from the feds, as did the original town of Port Hope. Hope Township's fund was in trust for the residents to directly defray taxes. The money, the interest that was earned on that fund was to be used for reducing taxes of Hope Township residents and subsequently Ward 2 residents. Since 2009, when we were given the go-ahead, we were told we would never have to send the money back to the feds, and so the $10 million had been held. The principal has not been touched in either fund, but the interest has been spent in a variety of ways, and it has not always been used for the defrayment of taxes. Sometimes the interest has been used to reduce costs, which in turn, of course, it does keep your taxes lower, but it's not directly applied against the tax bill, which was its original intent. And so the interest has been commingled with Ward 1's funds at the discretion of council. We would argue that that's not compliant with the original intent of the agreement. And one could, the staff have obtained a legal agreement that says that's okay. We don't think it's a good legal opinion, but we also don't think that it's consistent with the intent of the agreement or the spirit of it. And the municipality has this legal opinion. And so this is complex, but it is a separate issue in some respects. And you may think, well, we're not going after that $10 million or our interest. Yes, we will. The next slide. This is the original agreement. I'm not going to read it, and I don't expect you to read it. It's a bit fuzzy, but we did want you to know that it exists. There it is. It is bylaw 3605. And it does lay out the facts as we're declaring them and saying that that money was meant for Ward 2 residents. If you're a Ward 2 resident, you should be receiving interest on, that interest should be used to apply against your taxes. In any year that it doesn't need to defray the taxes of Ward 2 residents, then it can go into the pot. And there was some discussion in one of the slides last week that Council would be considering putting all of that fund and the Ward 1 fund into a community fund that they could use. And so I'd say we're opposed to that. And this next slide is an excerpt from a staff report as recently as 2012. I am going to read this one quickly. The amalgamation order, section 14.2, states reserve funds of the former municipalities, the town of Port Hope and Township of Hope, shall be used only for the purpose to which they were dedicated and for the benefit of the ratepayers in the area of the former municipality to which they relate. In other words, the $10 million provided to each municipality prior to amalgamation and placed in separate reserve funds is to be used for the benefit of the ratepayers of that particular geographic area. That's not us saying we want that. That's from the town or the municipality itself. So you can see that that has been the original intent, and it's people's expectations that should be continuing. Where some of the confusion has come and where some of the interpretation of that changes is that in 2009 when the feds, once we were licensed and the feds said we would never have to give that money back and it was really our money, that stipulation was removed. And so they're saying that all the stipulations have been removed, and we would argue no. And so we'll seek our own legal opinion on that. The next slide gets into this discussion about common and area rated, and this is probably the most confusing part of the whole thing. As most of you know, I have a background in banking, and I can read balance sheets and Excel spreadsheets, but it took me a year to figure out what was going on. To the degree I was able, given we didn't have all the facts, I can assure you. But basically what this boils down to is some costs can be put into common, and you split those according to weighted assessment. So weighted assessment is basically, and I'm going to try and make this as simple as I can, you take all of the impact values for both wards, you put them all together, and that's the total assessment. You weight that out by ag and industry and commercial and residential and so on, and you end up with a total weighted assessment, and then the difference between the two wards. So if one ward was 15% of the total and the other one was 85% of the total, you'd split those common costs accordingly. As it turns out, 30% of the total weighted assessment is in Ward 2, and that's why there's this potential increase and why there's a suggestion that it should go up so much. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about where the common came from and what to do about it and what we suggest we should do about it. We want to revisit that. But the area rating is those things that are delivered differently, and where service levels are different, and we've seen this in the city of Hamilton, we can area rate those, so it's specific to the area. So common is done according to the weighted assessment, but things that are unique and specific can be done by area rating, which is why we were called an area rating working group. Okay? So here are some of those terms that we just talked about. I'm trying to make them as non-complex as I can. The common expenses are things like administration and things like that. That can be allocated by weighted assessment. And each ward pays according to their share of what I call impact value. Most of you know what an impact is, or fair market value. Not a term I'm excited about either, but anyway. And then the non-common expenses are for things where the service received varies. And so we have a few slides that would suggest there are variable service levels in the two wards, and these can be area rated and not according to the impact values. So our next slide says it in bold letters, area rating reflects the cost of services received, and legislatively all services, except for public health, which Ian said earlier, can be area rated. That's contrary to the interpretation in one of the legal opinions that have been sought by the municipality. The next slide shows municipal taxes for two urban areas, Cobourg and Port Hope. There's been a lot of discussion about the taxes in Port Hope are the highest in the county, and that's been feeding into some of this myth that Ward 1 is paying way too much tax. I would argue, sure they are. If you got an expense problem, no wonder. However, if you look at Cobourg and Port Hope, Cobourg's about 94%, their mill rate's about 94% of ours. So yes, it's the most, but it's not that wildly out of whack. I don't think you should be feeling sorry for Ward 1 because their taxes are so much higher than everybody else's in the county. In the next slide, you can see 4 rural areas. We've highlighted 2, Alnwick, Haldeman, and MPHW2, that's us, or Ward 2. You can see they're not that far off. And we were told when we went into the committee that Ward 2 taxpayers were paying the lowest taxes. Well, some of that's because we were using LLRW, not because we were using the interest the way we were supposed to, but it was being put into the pot. So it was going in and reducing expenses various places. But in fact, when you take out that money and don't use it the way you're not supposed to, we actually don't have the lowest taxes. So some of the myth around how terribly Ward 2 is getting treated and how easy Ward 1's getting treated and how easy Ward 2 is getting off, we would argue is not true. Can we just go back one slide there? I just want you to also notice that Brighton and Hamilton Township, not the city of Hamilton, are also sort of in the same range as we are. So don't believe it when you hear that Ward 2 is getting a free ride, okay? The next slide. We think farmers are having a hard time already, and we wonder if it would be fair to increase their taxes by 46.9%. We also wonder what Ontario Hydro is going to say when they get an increase in their municipal taxes of 46.9%. So we have a bunch of questions. We don't think there's any proof that amalgamation formula is no longer working. And as Ian said, the 1585 split is pretty accurate. Yeah, sure, there's a couple of things where maybe we're getting, they should be 1783, or maybe they should be split 2080 even, I don't know. There's probably 1 or 2 things, but I'll bet there's just, and we don't have the data to prove that there aren't some things where Ward 2 is actually paying more than it should.
8713 sounds good.
Yeah, 8713 sounds good. Anyway, we thought 17.5 reflected a good movement forward, but that didn't go forward. And I've already suggested that Ward 1 really is not paying more than a share, and we don't believe that Ward 2 residents should carry any more of the tax burden, which I like to refer to it as. Does Council realize that it has this long-standing policy, and this is quoted in almost every one of their tax bylaws, and whereas a policy has been adopted by Council to ensure that tax burdens do not shift from one ward to the other. It's in almost every bylaw right up to 2012. And as Ian says, funnily enough, it's not in the 2013 bylaw. So I guess it's okay to shift tax burden now. The next slide shows a couple of little houses here. One's in Ward 1 and one's in Ward 2. And you'll see that the Ward 1 pays less tax than Ward 2. And that's because we pay more for our education taxes and we pay more for county taxes. So if you're living in Ward 2, you're already paying more for the average house. And so that's in 2013. We couldn't get from staff the number of households. So our ferreter went looking and found in Stats Canada that there are, in 2011, there were 5,091 households in Ward 1, and there were 1,464. And so that average distribution is what makes all of that different. But you're already paying more tax if you live in Ward 2 than in Ward 1. The next slide shows, we kind of like this picture. It's sort of differing levels of service. You'll recognize the gravel road in Ward 1 and the nice paved street, the nice curbs, the traffic island, the sidewalk, the fire hydrant. And we think that fire hydrant is a big issue. If you're talking about equal service in Ward 2 for fire, sure, it might be higher. We might have better fire protection and service than we had 20 years ago or 12 years ago.
But isn't that much? Welcome.
Yeah.
Help.
Yeah, well, we've got a picture of the fire hall and welcome. And the street lights. So the next slide is another picture. We think this one's good. Garden Hill Pond and the potential pier are, what's this thing called? Marina. The marina. I hear a rumor that that's gone, so maybe that's an unfair picture now, I don't know. But you can see we're not looking for all those slips for boats out in Garden Hill. The next slide is of the fire halls. And it came up the other night. I thought this was a bit rich when it was suggested that we have 2 fire stations in Ward 2, and therefore we have better service. And that, maybe not exactly what was being said, but it certainly was the tone. And I think we're not going to have 2 soon anyway, so who knows what's going on there. And then our final sort of what are the different service levels. This is the 2 Hillcrests. Hillcrest Drive in Ward 1 and Hillcrest Road in Ward 2. So I think you get the sense that we think that service levels differ, and therefore taxation should reflect that. And so for my final slide, in fall of 2012, there was a list of common and area rated items. So we were asked, let's put, and Ian mentioned this in his opening remarks, we were asked, let's put everything that we can in common, and then we'll distribute that according to a fair and equitable formula. So we thought we were going to go to something like 17.5 or 16 or 15 or whatever. And so we worked away at that. There was virtually no data coming out of the accounting system because, oh, well, we're one municipality. We can't keep track of what we spend over there and what we can spend over there. I would argue that in most businesses we can. And I would guess that in some municipalities it can even be done. But we don't want to have separate bookkeeping systems, frankly. Or we do, but I would argue that staff don't. Because it keeps things just sort of a little bit big and amorphous. Anyway, we put a lot of work into trying to figure out, to the degree we were able, with the limited data we had, what should be in common, and then it would be split. And then all of a sudden, this distribution formula was no longer on the table. We weren't going that way anymore. We were just going to do that by weighted assessment, and it all went from there. So I think, this legal agreement around what's compliant and what isn't, we're not going to go into any more detail on that tonight, but we have some information on that as well. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rick, who is going to present our option sub.
Again, thank you all for coming out tonight. As Ian pointed out earlier, the City of Hamilton has done essentially what we think would be fair and equitable. Unfortunately, the municipality has a legal opinion that says we can't go there. But since the City of Hamilton has already done it, and the ministry hasn't leaned on them to say it's all wrong, we have noted that where there are significant differences in service levels, there is agreement that services with significant differences in service levels may be potential candidates for area rating. Where there's significant difference in usage, property taxes are not a user fee, but they're a way of distributing the costs for local public services and programs throughout the municipality. And again, quoting from the City of Hamilton, major services should be considered for service rating. So that's kind of the underlying concept behind what the City of Hamilton has been doing. One of the important things to note is that the area rating in the City of Hamilton reflects the cost of services received. So the result of area rating is that tax rates for certain services vary depending on where you live and the level of service that's offered by the city and that you receive in that area. So all areas within the city have area rated costs, and depending on the levels of service, these costs vary. So City of Hamilton went through the same kind of thing we went through in 2000. They were merged together with a lot of smaller rural municipalities, so they have an inner city core, the urban area, and they're surrounded by relatively more rural areas to varying degrees. So their concept is that services like fire, recreation, sidewalks, and street lighting will be taxed consistently throughout the urban areas, with a reduced rate being charged to the rural areas. And to help mitigate any increase in taxes when they're making these adjustments, Hamilton City Council has approved a 4-year phase-in plan. So there's a couple of things we're seeing here. We're seeing more flexibility for the concept of area rating. We're also seeing flexibility in phasing in. And unfortunately, when that bombshell landed in June with the legal opinion that says you can't phase in, and there's a lot of stuff you can't area rate, that really threw us for a loop. Have the next slide, please. So this slide shows the share of total levy. We're starting for the years pre-amalgamation in the first bar. We have the years 1994 to 2000. The Ward 2 share was 13.9% through those years. The baseline that was used in the amalgamation formula was 14.2%. And it wasn't cast in concrete that it will always be 14.2. The amalgamation formula in 2003 was to recognize that the two wards will grow at different speeds. Maybe Wesleyville will build out very quickly and cause Ward 2 to have higher assessment. It was a dynamic formula, so it wasn't fixed at 14.2. In the years 2001 to 2004, the Ward 2 share was 15.9%. The next 4 years after that, it was 15.1%. And you can see by the length of the bars that they're all more or less in the same general vicinity until 2012. All of a sudden, the Ward 2 share was 17.8%. Have the next slide, please. So this slide has 2011 and 2012 repeated again for context. Then we see 2013, our current tax year, 15.9%. So Ward 2 is paying 15.9% of the total tax bill, and the balance is being paid by Ward 1. Now we come to last Monday night. Finance Director presented what they call the single rate option for information purposes. So for information purposes, it's on our slide. 27.2%. Then they went on, Mr. Baxter went on to present 6 other options. We'll talk about the first 4 because they don't involve phasing. And we didn't want to make too much stuff on the slide. So for options 1 through 4, their recommendation is that Ward 2 would pay 22.3% of the share. Option 7, which you're going to see tonight, we're recommending that Ward 2 would pay 17%. That's an estimate because there's data that we don't have access to. But we think it's pretty close to the mark and consistent with prior years and pre-amalgamation years. Next slide, please. So the municipality has offered 6 options. How fast do you want the Band-Aid pulled off? It's all the same. It's just how quickly do you want the increase to happen? And the municipality's 6 options that they're considering starts with $9.2 million of common costs, and they split that 73-27. About $5 million of area rated costs, they split 87-13. And that's primarily police and transit. As Ian noted earlier, police is one of the easiest things for us to track year by year because there's a separate bill for the OPP. We were also provided with what are probably quite accurate transit costs as well for Ward 1. So we're pretty firm on those. So the total levy is $14.5 million, and it works out to 78-22 split. Okay, what does that mean in terms of increases? You've heard the 46.9 mentioned a number of times, including a press release that's been put out by staff. That's the increase from 2013. What if we go back to 2011, and you'll recall on the earlier slide that 2012, 2013 were higher than historical years. It's a 67.8% increase from 2011. And as Ian pointed out earlier, we can't find any good reason why Ward 2's municipal taxes should go up 46.9, 67.8. If I hear a higher bid, I don't know. We're recommending option 7. Now, one of the things I'm going to say is there's probably people in the audience that love numbers. We'll have a separate session for you later. I can give you more numbers than you've ever seen. But for tonight, we want to boil this down to its essence. In option 7, we look at $3.5 million worth of common costs. We split them 73-27. That's the same ratio that was used in options 1 through 6. We've identified more departments, more budget lines to be area rated. $11 million worth. We split those 86-14. That number's going to ring a bell. We heard 86-14 pre-amalgamation. We heard it all through the 2000 to 2010. Excuse me. We still have $14.5 million of total levy. The split comes out to 83-17. Again, this is estimated. And we based on option 7, which is based on estimates, we would not expect a tax increase on your mill rate in Ward 2 in 2014. We're hoping that this option 7 will be considered by council. I got the next slide, please. There are handouts available on the table. We would encourage you to make your concerns known to council. Talk to your council representative. Fill in the comment forms. Send them into the municipality. Make note of our website address, our email address, our Facebook address. You don't have to be a member of Facebook to go and visit the Facebook page. It's an open public page. So if you have similar concerns to what we have, we would encourage you to make those concerns known. Ian.
Thank you, Perry. Now it's your turn. All those of you that have come here, surely a few of you have questions, comments, and it's time for you to express your concerns and ask about particular things we may not have covered, and would be glad to do so when prompted. And you can, of course, address your question to any one of us. We're here to do our best to answer. Yes, sir.
I wish to say a few words, if you don't mind.
Please.
Go up there.
Sure.
There is a mic at the back too, if people want to line up at the back. When you come forward, if people want to start at the back, there's a mic back there.
I could probably speak loud enough without the mic even, you know that?
I've heard you before.
Get up there. Okay. I just wanted to use this. Not really. Okay, yeah. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Mark Robert. I didn't want to come here, but there's things I know that should be made common knowledge to everybody in Ward 2. I ran for Ward 2 councilman there last election, and there was no talk of any tax increases before the election, and I feel that this is an issue that should be discussed before it's put through, with an election being done before anything like this huge increases put into effect that they're thinking of doing. I feel that what we have in town here in Port Hope is a bureaucracy, not a democracy. We have excessive taxation without representation, which is not legal in a democracy, as far as I'm concerned, and I can prove it. On April the 13th, 2010, I did a presentation on trying to get a water line through to Welcome. A week previous, I had been told by Jeff Lees, then Deputy Mayor, that there wasn't enough water pressure to put a water line in. That's why I did my presentation. Okay, the mayor was absent at that meeting. It was voted on that, brought up by, rest his soul, Ted Watts, after my presentation, that a copy of my presentation be sent to Lou Rinaldi, because they're the ones that are responsible for the water contamination in Welcome and should be paying for it. That's what I've been saying. And the the facts of the matter were, he was a very smart man, Ted Watts. He didn't just put through the motion that town staff put a costing for design and cost, you know, at the planning and development department for putting it through, but he also put another motion forward that it be done within 6 weeks. Okay, 6 weeks. Okay, nothing happened in a year. I had been bouncing it back from that department to the works department. I've been down to Peter DeLangelo. He's a competent engineer. He should be able to drop these plans instead of hiring an outside consulting firm with his small wages compared to us folks. And obviously, things are out of whack. Okay, that's wrong. Okay, there was 3. I stated it in my presentation, and I do have a copy of that presentation there if somebody from the press would be interested. That's our guardian of democracy, supposedly. I don't know. I wonder sometimes. But you are here, so that's a good start. I also would like to mention that the minutes aren't proper at council meetings. The things were put down like they are in the Winnipeg, Manitoba, their council meetings, word for word, who said what, on a Hansard recording device, which is going to be used this Wednesday at the Canton Hall, because I got to the second meeting at these community forums, which part of me pushing for more openness in council is maybe why they have these. I'm open, but anyways, I'll get shut off talking there real quick, so that's why I'm trying to talk here now. I will just finish off with the letter that was sent to Lou Rinaldi stated that the mayor was present at that meeting. She was not present. In 1986, she had ran on the platform that she'd get a water line through to Welcome, and 4 years later, you can check with any of the people in the village, they'll back that up, your cousin, for instance. I'm pissed off, okay? Not later.
A lot of history here tonight.
There's a lady over there.
Ian,
Yes,
at the
go ahead.
back, the microphone.
Yes.
Hello. I'd like to thank the 3 gentlemen who presented so articulately tonight. You've done a wonderful job, and all your efforts are much appreciated. My question to all of you is, it would appear from my limited understanding that option 7 is the only intelligent option we've heard, and council is claiming that this is not a legal position. What can we, the people in this room, do to persuade them that option 7 is valid and worthy of implementation?
Fire. We can do several things. We can ask them to come tonight and to listen to what we consider to be a very logical approach to this, to, through that process, invite them to question something that they may not have chosen to question before. In other words, what's the validity of the advice that they're getting? Are they being misled? Another thing you can do is to press home a point of this nature directly with your councillors. Make them aware of your feelings. They represent you. And they're going to have to listen to what you have to say. And this is all about what's good for the community. And this is all about hearing from the community. So I'm sure that the councillors will listen. And the important thing is just to assemble the facts and be able to display them in a way that everybody can comfortably accept them. That's our objective. If they don't listen, kick them out. Elections are coming. Do it then.
Class action lawsuit.
We have democracy on our side. It might take a year, but if you're not satisfied with the councillor, then of course you can change it.
I have one comment to make. Your presentation was clear and precise. I agree with what you say. We need to act on this. However, it says, make your concerns known to your council. After last week's meeting, I went back up and I asked Linda Thompson again, privately, what she was going to do for us with all the money that they were going to collect. She stood there and she listened to me nose to nose. And finally, at the end, she told me if I didn't like the taxes, and I've been in this area at the farm for 33 and a half years, she told me if I didn't like the taxes, I could move.
Get that, newspaper man? I see it in bold print.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. I was wondering if you could tell me what legal firm that the town got this opinion from, please?
The legal firm is called Temple and Malinga. They are located in Belleville.
Can we challenge that opinion legally?
We have
And what's been the result?
this meeting.
Well, it's been a success then. We beat them. Thank you.
A legal opinion is only that, a legal opinion. It's not a fact, it's an opinion.
Ian, Vancouver speaking. I've known you and Rick and Bill for a long time, and I'm a resident of Ward 2, and a commercial property owner and agricultural property owner too, who's facing increase in taxes of close to $5,000 a year by my calculations. Trying to play the devil's advocate, I understand sort of where the town's coming from. I think paving your streets with gold, putting bricks on the sidewalks, making everything really attractive, building wonderful town business parks and all that sort of thing is a wonderful way for a town to attract business and people, and that's what towns are supposed to do. We in the rural community or often think differently. I remember the road grader was driven by a retired, not retired, but a farmer part-time. The municipality was there to put a culvert in when trucks needed to get into a field to unload, to remove grain, et cetera, et cetera. We're much more conservative in the municipality. The issues I have interpreted with the limited amount of time I spent reading the emails that have been sent out by not only the ratepayers group, or your group, but also the Chamber of Commerce, who sent out a very useful, somewhat slanted approach, but is that it's a question of usage versus access. And they're suggesting our taxes should go up because we have access to the services. And you've talked about our usage of the services. I think usage is a much fairer option. I'm very much in your camp. The other thing I've discovered is that a lot of the things that we, I've had a lot of discussions with people, and a lot of the issues that come up, or the points about sidewalks, sewers, water, and streetlights, but those are all taken into consideration, I understand, in our assessment. So if your house is worth, say, $300,000 in Ward 2, it would probably be assessed considerably higher in Ward 1 because it has access to sidewalks, paved roads, sewers, and water. So that point is taken into consideration. My final point is that there probably is an option 8. I hate to throw this out, but we would have been a whole lot better had we amalgamated with Hamilton Township.
2 points in response. I recognize that option 8 is out there. There is currently an initiative at the county level to reorganize and reorient the service delivery at the county level. The door is open. And just as you can have a lot line adjustment on your property, you can have a boundary line adjustment on your municipality. We don't want to go there. We want to fix this problem. Because we believe that there are people in council who are able to reconsider a direction that has taken them the wrong way, and we're getting to a cliff. So let's not talk about option 8 for the moment.
Let's talk about option 7, what you just said. The council we have now may not be the council we're going to have a year from now, or 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. What's to stop them from coming back in 2 or 3 years from now? Oh, I'm sorry.
You want the mic?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about wanting to get it fixed within an amalgamated municipality, but the council we have now will not be the same council we're going to have 3 years from now or 5 years from now. There's no guarantee, as long as we're amalgamated, that this isn't going to hit us again in 2 or 3 years or 4 years. It's a pretty capricious move. The elephant in the room definitely is amalgamation. And I think the solution, I mean, let's face it, when we amalgamated, there were a lot of benefits and promises made, none of which, as far as I can tell from a Ward 2 point of view, ever came true.
Here, here.
You know, there was no economy of scale, there was no reduction in staff, there was no decrease in taxes, there was no improved services. Now we're expected to, we're paying taxes now ever since amalgamation at a rate at least double, percentage-wise anyway, as we were paying prior to being amalgamated. Thanks very much, Ian, for some great management that you and your people did as a township, right? I'll give you that. And amalgamation is taking that away from us. And as long as we are amalgamated, we're going to be having this meeting on a regular basis with every new council that comes in. I mean, I remember the first time the mayor ran, I helped her with her committee, and I said, you know, my going in position is I would like to de-amalgamate, but if it has to be a second position, I'd like to hope to get a mayor from Ward 2, which might offer some protection. Now, and I believe that because I'm scared to death of a Ward 1 mayor. I mean, we are outnumbered and outgunned on every issue, and the most perfect example I can think of, other than these silly 6 options they gave us last week, is the policing issue. I mean, here we spent some money, a lot of money, on a study by a reputable firm that came back with potential $1 million savings if we consolidated with the OPP as one police service. Ward 1 was having none of it, and they you know, won the right to have their own police force. Well, good for them. But somehow, this council has figured out a way to get Ward 2 to pay for the lost benefit. And if they can do it there, then obviously the will of the majority is going to overtake us every time, as long as we're still together as an amalgamated community with the attitude we have with certainly the current council, and there's no guarantee it's not going to be any better with the next council. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I think I have a lot of good friends in Ward 1, and You know, I think everybody's a goodwill. We just got a traditional or a classic rural-urban divide problem, and I think we're trying to make a salt purse out of a sow's ear, no matter how you juggle the numbers around, you know. But my concern is that we're going to be visiting this, even if you get this approved, and there's no guarantee, you know, you're even going to get option 7. So I think most of the council, and we're still outgunned, is you know, determined we're going to be paying close to 50% more. So, you know, my concern is going down the road too, Ian. Sorry about that.
Anyway.
We hope we all hope we've got a little more road to go down. 2 points in response. First of all, I think what you're alluding to, the underlying concern here is one of mistrust.
Yep.
That needs to be fixed. And that needs to be fixed by the councillors. They need to demonstrate to us, the taxpayers, that they have earned our trust. Over to you, gentlemen and ladies. Do it. But the other point is that if we have a fair taxation system that is transparent, can be explained to people, then it will endure. Because people will be able to see that it works and why it works. And God bless, we have the trust restored and this system will work. But absent those 2 ingredients, we're in for a tough road. Yes, we are. Next question.
Yes, I think the last 2 speakers sort of took the wind out of my sails, but I would like to add my thanks to you, Mr. Angus, and Bill, and Rick. Great job. And I think it has to be recognized that we're not a Kawartha Lakes or another large municipality that merged a lot of rural municipalities with suburban municipalities with a more even split of representation. We've got one large urban population with a small rural, 1 and 1. So we're constantly outnumbered by 4 to 2 in council on everything we do. So we're constantly looking over our shoulder, trying to defend ourselves against anything that the council comes up with. So I'm wondering, I think the greater issue here is that, in that even if we win this particular battle, the next battle's just around the corner. And how do we constantly defend ourselves against the 4 to 2 majority or minority we're in? Is it possible that we need a backup plan in case we don't win this particular battle, and we could approach Hamilton Township and speak to them and see about what the possibilities are of amalgamating with Hamilton and leaving Port Hope?
Anything is possible, but that's not why we're here tonight. That's for another night. And having said that, anything is possible.
Thank you.
Is your mic there, please? I was wondering why, what's your sense of the reason why you had such a difficulty getting information from staff while you were working in this, as a part of this working group? And I mean, it seems to me that you had to spend a lot of your own time digging up information that should have been available to you as part of the working group. And I'm just wondering what your assessment of it is. And I mean, it certainly doesn't speak well for our ability to work together, and I think that's a big issue.
Bill or Rick, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, when we first got going in the committee, back a year, well, almost 2 years ago now, we were at it for 22 meetings over a year and a half. And it was very clear where staff stood on this. And they think that sort of one rate, everybody pays for everything, is the way. And so that became the debate right from the very first meeting. Liz Aruja, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right, I mean, she would just sit there defiantly saying, no, it's not about access, it's not about usage, it's about access. And we would just, you know, there was no talking to her. And so I would argue that the CAO agrees with her. And so that, and I respect that they have that opinion, but it's not consistent with what we were thinking, and so there was no discussion. So I'm not trying to downgrade their skills or their competence, but I would argue that they just have a different viewpoint on this, and so there was no sense that they needed to give us anything, and then I will sort of comment on the attitude became sort of, you don't need this. And so it became difficult to get anything. You want to add anything?
Rick, you had numerous meetings with Mark French.
Mark was very helpful.
I think we need to be careful that we don't suggest that all of staff has been uncooperative. That wouldn't be fair. Our former head of finance is no longer with the municipality. So we're looking forward to working with Mr. Baxter going forward. But as Ian pointed out, staff made the recommendation in 2012 to very dramatically increase board 2 taxes. It didn't happen. There was a lot of pushback from the public, so there was a committee that was formed. So the taxes did not jump up in 2012, but it was staff's recommendation at the time. So they had their own position. And unfortunately, in case of that particular staff member, it wasn't like they were an employee assisting us. It was more that they had the right information, and that's the way we were going to have to go. So maybe we're just too obstinate or persistent or stupid. I'm not sure what it was. But we just kept digging and digging and digging until we could try to find the information that we thought we needed.
Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? My name is Dean Ross, and Mr. Angus pointed out there's a lot in this whole thing, a matter of trust. We have on our doorstep, and I'm not sure, I hope that most of you or all of you are aware of it, we have on our doorstep a gross indecency coming our way. We're trying to duck it, and that's an incinerator. I've been working on it with several other people. We have a group, and we're doing our damnedest to try and get this thing out of the way. It would be a terrible thing to happen for hope. We don't want to get garbage spewed out into our air over our heads while we're still in the midst of trying to get rid of the low-level radioactive waste. And one of the things that we're finding is that hidden in corners here and there is this matter of trust. And we're having very, very difficulty getting information out of the municipalities' ruling group. And I'm sure just the same that you had getting the finances out. And I just warn you, get on the bandwagon, help us to make sure that this incinerator doesn't come on the doorstep. It would destroy farms, it would destroy business, everything. Thank you.
This business about this incinerator, I've got sick and tired of it. Every place I look, it says incineration. It isn't incineration, it's gasification. They've been using it in Europe for years. They know what they're doing. What are you going to do with your garbage? We ain't got no place for garbage. It's got to be looked after. It's got to get modern. And that's all I can say. And everybody that's got those signs on their lawns are telling a lie. Because it is not incineration. People can't get it through their head.
I'd sort of like to keep on point here. That is not to say that anybody in this room was unhappy to hear you express your opinions. We're here to express our opinions, and thank you for doing it.
Ian, can you just clarify for us what the decision-making process is going to be over the next little while? I'm hearing November 15th to try and get your views communicated to your councillor. How's the decision-making process going to happen on this?
That's a question I have absolutely no clue about. None. We're supposed to be on this committee, but we're gone. So we're not part of it. If there's a councillor there, maybe they can help.
I'll do my best to answer, Ian, and thanks. The comment period right now is out till November the 15th. There'll be a committee report come back to our finance committee on November 26th. So it is important for everyone to get their comments out and into the council. All options will be considered on the 26th. Decision necessarily may not be made, it may be made. Doesn't mean that it will be made. So that's why I say the comment period is open now. 26th it comes back, and at that point we'll decide on go forward position. Whether the go forward position could be that we need to do further consultation, the go forward position could be that we have a vote on one of the options that are presented that evening. Is that okay? And then, that's correct. On taxation issues, Ward 2 councillors have the option to double their vote. Correct. That's correct. It has to be expressed at the time of the vote.
To you, Jeff, will option 7 be on the table at that meeting?
We would ask Ian, if you're a committee, I asked Rick prior to the meeting, if he was going to submit this as part of the comments into the municipality, then it should be on the table. Any options, maybe there's some other options that other people may have as well.
Consider it submitted. It will be on the meeting.
Hi, my name is Carmen. I live in Garden Hill. I've got two questions. One, I wonder if it's fair to ask Jeff and Greg to use your two votes at this tax meeting as decision making. Will you use it? Yeah? Okay, good. Okay, that's number one. Number two is on the comment sheet. Is it, we can express our views, but wouldn't it be better to be consistent and say, hey, we want option 7?
Here wants option 7.
Who doesn't want option 7? For those who are observing, I don't see any councillor putting up his hand. But we're not finding you, we're just no.
Ian?
I've got the gentleman in the back, and then I'll take you.
Good evening, my name's Earl Ashby. I see at the table where we came in the door there's a jar, and there's a few dollars in it. I encourage everybody here to get their wallet out, purse out, and because this all costs money, and if we don't put some money in there tonight for Ian and Bill and Rick and their staff, Ward 1 will take what's left of it.
I want to thank you all for clarifying the issues. I certainly, as I was looking into this, was
I found that the legal opinions expressed, although I didn't see the whole thing saying that it wasn't in compliance with the Act, seems to me to be a legal fiction after reviewing the Act itself and having some knowledge about what's been going on in other municipalities. The other thing that troubles me, being new to the community, is to see that this whole action by council has been extremely divisive, to our community. And given what I witnessed tonight in terms of the explanations, I thought it was a very convincing case for option 7, but also it tears apart the rationale that council has put forward. In light of what's going on tonight and other comments, I'd like to hear from some of the aldermen that are here. Councilmen, sorry. But I'd like to hear from them. What are they going to do to heal the rift in this community? Give us, particularly those who support options 1 through 6, or the poison dosages, but give us an explanation of how you come up to justify this whole thing, because I haven't really seen that, and I think the people that are in this room don't see that too. So I'd like to hear from, I noticed Mr. Turk at the last meeting raised his hand in support. That I thank you for being straightforward and honest. But I'd like to hear from the other councilmen that are here, what they're going to do to heal the rift in this community, and you give me, in the light of what's been said, you give me an alternative explanation that justifies this kind of an increase.
Thank you, sir, but I'm going to point out that the councillors have been invited here tonight, and I know we're being a little bit hard on them, but I don't think it's fair to put them on the spot. That's not the purpose for which they came.
That's what they got elected to do, I'm sorry to say, is to be on the spot.
My name is Jim Ronson. I'm from Ward 1. And I just wanted to say that I want to speak on behalf of the Port Hope Ratepayers Association. And we're here to represent all taxpayers. And we would like to have Ward 1 representation and Ward 2 representation within our association. Because I noticed that last week somebody spoke about the council having a spending issue, and we certainly share that. And one of the things we're looking forward to after this meeting is inviting people in this room and other people to come forward to express their views on how they are being taxed and how our money is being spent in Port Hope. So I'll be at the back of the room in order to give out a little bit of information about our association, and I'd invite you to become a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to quick response to one of the things you said, sir, because you referred to the legal opinions. And it should be said that when we contacted the ministry, it was ministry staff that directed us to the city of Hamilton. There's some credence in what we're saying. Go ahead.
My question concerns the division of the common versus the area rated services, and it would seem to me by looking at the municipalities options 1 through 6 versus option 7, that perhaps you've divided those groupings a little bit differently. Can you expand on that at all?
Can I get you on this, Bill, or Rick, please? I'm sorry, I wasn't at the meeting on last Monday, so I'm going to duck that one.
In options 1 through 6, council's options that they're considering, that staff has put forward, they have a different strategy on what's common and what's area rated. And their common number is 9.2 million, which they divide 7327. And the area rated items are primarily police, transit, bulky waste pickup, Christmas tree pickup, a few other items like that. Comes to about 5 million. And they split those 87-13. As Ian pointed out in his introduction, we've gone with a different strategy, the one that the City of Hamilton has used. And in that strategy, the focus is on administrative type costs being common, to be shared based on weighted assessment. So in option 7, we have about $3.5 million worth of common costs. That's in contrast to $9.2 million in the options 1 through 6. And we split those on the same ratio, 73-27. But in option 7, we have identified many more costs where the services received are different in the two wards, total of $11 million, and those are split 86-14. So that's a primary philosophical difference between options 1 through 6 and option 7. We still have common costs, we have area rated costs. It's just a question of which costs are in which pot.
Thank you, Rick. Please go ahead.
I have a business in Ward 1, and we've been battling for different things, same as you guys. It's a case of the spending. Ward 1 people didn't want the Dorset Street stuff. Ward 1 people didn't want pillars. Ward 1 people didn't want the business park. We've got the same problems, Ward 1 and Ward 2. So just please try to remember, we've also got a common area where we're against the same people, basically. It's not Ward 1 against Ward 2, we're all against the spending. So I get a little nervous when I see some of the things that have been said and whatnot. It's not Ward 1 as such. We're against the same things you guys are. Excessive spending, silly.
Other questions? Sir.
Thank you, Ian. And trying to stay on subject, but I'm going to mention the incinerator or lack of incinerator. I only want to mention that because it's been mentioned to me that we cannot use the new email methods to comment and send in things to our people in power. And I wanted to know if you had any experience in that. If I send in a comment like this by email to our councillors, is it considered the same thing as a letter that went into them? That's basically my question. I'd like to know, can we use new modern technique to reach our people in power and get our message across? Or do we have to put a stamp on a letter and send it in?
What we can do is, if you can get your comment to us in one way or another, we will get it in to City Hall. It means whatever technology you wish to use, but if you can get it to one of us, that's why Christine's here. She does wizards with delivery of information. So.
Any email that's sent to councillors, we forward it on to staff. That'll be in the record. Okay, it is forwarded on by each and every council member, so it is a matter of record.
Thank you, Rick.
Could you repeat that?
We'll get the, I think what Barry was saying is that we need to get the email initiated. But we can help with the initiation, and thank you. You'll cope with it when it gets there. That's great. Questions, please?
comment sheets, those comment sheets that we fill out, who gets them? Does council get them, or do you get them, or who gets them? Because they might be just shredded up. Other stuff.
Anything we receive, we will forward. I can't tell you what the process is once it gets to town hall.
We all know why the taxes are going up. They need a new police station, they need a new fire hall. They want us to cover that because when we've done all the studies for the OPPs to take over the whole municipality, one of our councilmen, when he was going to vote to keep have the OPPs, at the last minute he said, well, I'm going against the taxpayers, but I got the people. Well, we're people too, and we're too, but we're not stupid up there. Maybe they think we are, but we're not. And then they can save $10 million. Now they want a big tax raise here.
Are there others that wish to comment? Yes? Either one, back there or up here.
I heard somebody here mention that it's not an issue about Ward 1 versus Ward 2. It's really Ward 1 and Ward 2 against the same problem or cause of what's going on, which is basically class separation, class warfare. It's taking money from one group and giving it to another group. And this causes people to become upset. And it's not really an issue, only a local issue. This happens on a federal, provincial, and municipal level. And I guess my question would be, when I hear fair taxation system, I just get a little bit confused because fair taxation, would it use the existing process of a threat of force or force in order to extort money from taxpayers?
A fair taxation system is perceived by those who write the checks as being reasonable and fair. That perception is obtained through two ways. First is some trust in the people that are sending them the tax bills. And second, in the transparency of the methodology which they can understand as to how that tax bill has been compiled and presented to them.
I guess on that topic then, a question I would ask anybody in this room, including councillors, anybody, is have you ever looked at the audited financial statements of the municipality or the county? And if so, can you understand it? And if so, what are your questions about that? Because you mentioned reserve funds collecting interest and being paid back into the city or redistributed in some way or another, but I don't think a lot of people actually understand the process between paying taxes and how the government, any level of government, uses those money to provide services, because there's a lot of steps in between giving money for roads and when the government actually uses that money for roads. As far as I understand, they will try to let money accumulate into these various funds and not present them on a budget report in order to collect interest off of government bonds or other corporate interests like stock market funds, which governments do. Every city does, every school board does, every pension fund does. And I think basically I just, when I hear fair taxation, it's talking about a bigger problem, which again, like I said, is, I believe, class separation, class warfare, divide, and you know, have people not aware of where their money is actually going. If there was actually transparency in this involuntary tax collection and spending, then I think people would be a little bit more outraged and want to do something about it.
Can you tell me if the comment sheet is available on your portal for fair taxes?
We've got some available.
She's asking if it's available
On the
Online.
website.
On the portal.
People can just go to it and fill it in and.
We could put it on the site.
We will make the comment sheet available
Good.
on our
That'll make it
website.
easier for everybody.
We have these, right? If you want to take them.
If I don't find anybody else wanting to speak,
Well, with all due respect to the last speaker, this isn't really about where our taxes are being spent necessarily. It's about the percentage of increase of our taxes for those services that is being spent on. So, you know, how they do stocks and everything like that. I don't need more specific anyway. However, I wanted to comment on a gentleman who mentioned option 8, and it didn't necessarily get a huge, big clap, but in response to what he said, he does have a legitimate concern. If we're being poured on with all these services, and we're going to be made to pay a much higher percentage for that service, then why don't we look elsewhere? Because at that point, Ward 1 won't be receiving our initial taxes, nor will they receive the increase of 46.9 that they are demanding of us. That sounds like a big number to go over to another township and amalgamate with them or get services somewhere else. I don't see why that is such a problem. And then Ward 1 can deal all the services with who they have in Ward 1. They can pay for everything that way. I don't see why it's not an option. I think it's a great option. If everything else is being dished out at a lower cost elsewhere, why not look at it? I think it's a great option. So, you know, this is my comment.
I think, sir, we alluded to that earlier, and that subject has been put on the table in a motion at the county level. It was moved by Mark Lushin and seconded by the mayor of the municipality of Port Hope, that different ways of delivering services, certainly at the county level and by extension, other services should be looked at and a report brought forward.
Did she not, or did they not, Mark and Linda, did they not want to join all 5 municipalities together?
Let's go elsewhere. Exactly. And then Ward 1 don't get any of our money. We need that.
Others have questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me, is there anywhere we can find out the details of what is common and what is area rated? Is that a big factor on this?
Yes. First of all, speak to Rick.
Pardon me?
Speak to Rick.
Right.
And Rick, can we put that detail up on our website?
Yes, I believe. Bill, is that on one of the handouts tonight?
No, well, on the back, but not detailed number. On the back of the handout that has the... You've got a 2-sided handout. One side just shows the difference between options 1 to 6 and option 7. And on the back there's a bit of detail, but you'd have to go to our long report, which is on our website, isn't it?
The response document.
The big document.
Yeah.
Yes, the big document's there. It's about 20-some pages, but it does talk about all the stuff that we think could be in common and all the stuff that we think should not be in common.
Is there?
And we don't have all the numbers exactly, so they're estimates on some of them.
And you don't have them because they haven't been built to you?
I don't want to say it quite that way. I mean, some numbers have been hard to get, and we have said that. But some of the option 8 numbers we haven't even asked for at that level yet. Or option 7, sorry. No.
I think it's really time to wrap this up unless there are other people wishing to come forward. Yes, sir.
Should this comment also be put towards our MP or MPPs?
You're asking if our option 7 and our thoughts should be forwarded to our MPP?
Yes, do they have any input into this at all?
We will see that our MPP gets a copy of it.
No comment regarding that. I spoke with Rob Milligan today. He is quite concerned about the amalgamation and the concern of all the residents. He wants a phone call to update him what has happened in this meeting. He has come and he has noted an agreement to myself on a telephone conversation.
Excuse me, sir. Are you associated with his office?
No, I'm not. I'm Ward 2 citizen.
Okay.
And when I spoke to his office, he even admitted, when I spoke to Rob, today, he admitted that the amalgamation with Port Hope was incorrect and should not have taken place. He told me that we should have amalgamated with Hamilton Township or another township that has similar services. And he is quite concerned about this 46% increase and how our taxes have increased since amalgamation. So I will be calling him tomorrow, trying to get a group together and to meet with Rob Milligan to discuss amalgamation further.
One more question.
One more right here.
2 more questions.
Okay.
I just was informed recently that, and I know my husband is retired from the municipality too. He worked for Ward 2 Roads Department for many years before working for Hope Town, or after working for Hope Township. And it's common practice, and I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but our Ward 2 employees are often sent to Port Hope to do the jobs that they are not able to do in Ward 1. But yet our bill reflects that we're being charged for it, although our employees aren't being paid the same. So maybe that's something to look into too. It's true.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on a question from over here on the options. You know, you guys have listed, I'm sorry, on the back of the page you've listed the option 7 and basically what you consider a split or where the numbers come from. But is there any place we can go to look at what the town or the municipality of Port Hope consider the split? Where did they come up with the numbers, the 46%?
Look for Rick.
On the website. Yeah, Rick, is it on their website? Okay. Thank you.
If you go to the Ministry of Port Hope website, on the left-hand side of the main page, you'll find a reference to the area rating review process. If you click on that link and scroll way, way, way down, you'll find a bunch of links that have lots of information related to options 1 through 6, press releases from the municipality, references to agreements that were signed many years ago. There's a lot of information there that the municipality has put up over the last few weeks that will give you, if you're an insomniac, just start reading it and we'll do it for you.
On behalf of Rick and Bill, and personally, I want to thank you all very much for coming out and hearing this tonight. It's been a real relief for us all. Thank you.